Now, when we talk about the original Star Wars Battlefront games that were like on the PS2 and stuff, they're often looked at as like the cream of the crop of Star Wars video games, the original. And people still to this day mourn the fact that Star Wars Battlefront 3 never got finished and released. Now, remember, in 2005, Star Wars Battlefront 2 came out for the PS2, and there was a PSP version and an Xbox version too, and a Windows version. But the PS2 one is the one that everyone talks about, but the PSP one, I didn't even know existed. I don't know how I missed this one, but okay, cool. It existed. And apparently it wasn't even all that bad. I mean, it definitely was the lesser of the versions to play, but it was like in 3D. I was expecting to be like one of those like DS ports of a main game when they're always like, you know, isometric cameras and just like a real crazy experience. Now, while people were waiting for the hopeful Star Wars Battlefront 3 back in the day, it never came. But there was more Star Wars Battlefront in the series. 2 more games still released after Star Wars Battlefront 2. And to be honest, before working on this video, I had no idea these games existed, probably because I was a DS kid growing up, but Luke had played a little bit of them when I asked him about it before I dove into these games. So in 2007, 2 years after Star Wars Battlefront 2 for the PS2 and all those systems came out, Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron released. And it was a PSP exclusive, and it had its own campaign, which was pretty cool. And it even had online multiplayer functionality with GameSpy, so RIP, but still interesting. Now, the biggest takeaway, despite the fact that the game was surprisingly not the worst. I mean, it wasn't like outstanding, but it still scored like 7 and 8s out of 10s, which is higher than what you would think from like a handheld exclusive. The biggest takeaway, I think, is that the box art looks so damn cool. I love the fact that they kind of kept the theme of Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2's box art, but they did something unique, and I love that. And then 2 more years later, 2009, the dark era of Star Wars. And by dark era, I just mean there wasn't like any movies coming out, a lot of different side projects, spin-offs, like we were getting pretty close to those Kinect dancing games coming out. But Star Wars Battlefront Elite Squadron 2009 released the PSP exclusive game. This is insane to me. There also was a DS version, but I digress there. Honestly, 2009 for a PSP exclusive Star Wars game, and I'm standing with using the term exclusive because, I mean, look at the DS version. This is something different. It's really interesting. I think the fact that this game never got the Star Wars Battlefront 3 that everyone wanted, but there still was life in the Star Wars Battlefront IP before the big old EA reboot later on, says a lot about how good those original 2 games were, that they continued to make these little spin-offs for 2 more games 4 years later. And once again, the box art kind of slaps. I don't know. What's really interesting is that the PlayStation Portable opens up a whole can of worms when it comes to games that kind of came to the PSP to die. I know that sounds like really bleak, but believe it or not, a lot of game series would have a final PSP game before they died. I don't know why the PSP is the one that has the reputation of this, but it does. In most cases, it was a little bit of a mess, but not always. There were some bangers that were final entries that came onto the PSP. Like for instance, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was MediEvil, this like action adventure game that came out on the PlayStation, and it got a sequel 2 years later in the form of a very cleverly titled MediEvil 2, and there wasn't a third one. There would be actually nothing for a really long time. Except randomly on the PlayStation Portable in 2005, it got one more game before just completely disappearing off of the face of the planet in the form of MediEvil Resurrection, which was essentially a reimagining of the first game, and it was a launch title for the PSP. It had bad camera angles and frame rate drops pretty regularly, so it didn't do all that well review-wise. Also, there was some problems with the hit detection, there was some collision issues, some of the gameplay felt tedious, and then I knocked over a can of soda on my desk. And MediEvil died there in 2005 until it got another remake in 2019. There was the classic Syphon Filter games back on the original PlayStation as well. Starting in 1999, it was a third-person shooter. It had Syphon Filter, then Syphon Filter 2 a year later, then Syphon Filter 3 another year later. And then 3 years later, there was for the PlayStation 2, Syphon Filter the Omega strain, which, mind you, didn't review very well and also had its own controversy in Canada, of all places. Apparently, the game's first 3 levels in the campaign were supposed to be set in Toronto, Canada, and there was like this whole story arc about like people from Quebec doing terrorist bombings in the Toronto subway. And then towards the end of the development, I guess there was like concern that this could be offensive. So then they decided to change the city to some fictional city in Michigan. But they like left the skyline of Toronto in the game and some other references to Toronto. It's weird. The game didn't do well. That's what's important here. And I think the series would have been dead in the water all the way back then. But they still got 2 more games on the PlayStation Portable. And after a 2-year hiatus, Syphon Filter Dark Mirror released for the PlayStation Portable in 2006. It was trying to make a comeback to the original things that made Syphon Filter popular, and it actually kind of did good. At least the PlayStation Portable version, of all places. You see, the game also got a PS2 release, which I think was just like a throwaway because they were already working on it for the PSP. And mind you, the PS2 version came out like a year after the PlayStation Portable version in 2007, which was 2 years after the PlayStation 3 already released. So I think that reaffirms my throwaway point here. But the PSP version scored an 87 out of 100 on Metacritic. So like, that was pretty good. Like, they kind of single-handedly saved the series here. They brought it back. They weren't going to end on a bad note like with the previous game. And then finally, Syphon Filter 6 was set up to release on the PlayStation Portable as well, all the way in 2007. And once again, it actually did pretty well review-wise, 85 out of 100 on Metacritic. And you would think they would have done more, but it must not have sold too well. Maybe the Syphon Filter branding was already maybe not as mainstream as they had hoped, because they never did another game. And there's been like rumors speculating that they might remake or reboot Syphon Filter in some way in the future, but nothing ever has come from that. Also, while we're at it, you know how on Syphon Filter 5, they released it on the PS2 a year later? For Syphon Filter 6 here, Logan's Shadow, they released the PS2 version in 2010. 3 years after the PlayStation Portable released, they finally put it out on the PS2. Not the PS3, just the PS2. They're like, here, for all of you that are hanging on with the PS2 in 2010, enjoy Syphon Filter 6. Now, there are other examples of games that kind of did the same exact thing Syphon Filter did. Twisted Metal was going to be pretty dormant, I'm sure, after Twisted Metal Black released, but Twisted Metal Head-On came out on the PSP, and then it got ported to the PS2 3 years after its launch. It was kind of a mid-game, I think. I'm sure there's a Twisted Metal Head-On fan that's like really upset I just said that out there. This was before the whole reboot in 2012 that then definitively killed the series, but as far as the original run goes, it ended here. I was gonna like talk in detail about the game Ape Quest for the PlayStation Portable, but I did a little research, and Ape Academy 2, interestingly enough, some of you remember this game, and a lot of you don't remember this game, because this game, Ape Academy 2, released in Japan, in Europe, and Australia, but it never released in North America, so RIP the US, Canada, and Mexico. It finally saw its first official release when it had a PS4, PS5 release in 2023, so North Americans could officially play the game. But as it turns out, after Ape Escape 3, there's a bunch of Ape Escape games in the whole spin-off series and stuff that never made a release over here in the West. Ape Quest being one of them. Saru Get You, Saru Big Mission, what a name, also was a Japan exclusive spin-off. So, but the Ape series did live on a little bit longer thanks to the PlayStation Portable, for a while at least, before it died. There's a few other series that had similar situations. There was This Is Football that had a few entries, and then finally one last release on the PSP called This Is Football Manager. Wild Arms had Wild Arms XF to end that series. Resistance had Resistance Burning Skies, which wasn't on the PlayStation Portable, but it was the same thing, just they did it on the PS Vita era. Same with MotorStorm RC. It was the 5th game in the series, and it released on the Vita and PS3, and then died. And then Jak and Daxter, which is like a really big IP or mascot type series, I would think, from PlayStation back in the day, had Jak and Daxter Last Frontier, which was a PSP game. It also had a PS2 port for it, and that released in 2009, 3 years after the PlayStation 3 released, which surprising for a PSP game and then also a PS2 game, and then that was the end of the Jak and Daxter series. I know I'm like really just hamming in on Sony, and it was mostly just because I researched Sony games first, and that's how this video turned out. But there's a lot of other games we're going to talk about here too, so just hang tight because it gets even spicier. In the early 2000s, World War II video games were pretty popular. It was Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, and another series known known as Brothers in Arms. Now, there was a series of Brothers in Arms games released on PC and console, like Road to Hill 30, Hell's Highway. These are neat games. They're like tactical shooter squad-based World War II experiences, and they had some emotional storytelling at their root. But while the game was doing cool things, I mean, it blended this whole like third-person and first-person elements together, and there were new games coming out pretty regularly. There was a DS spinoff. Essentially, after Hell's Highway released, though, as far as main games were concerned, that was kind of it, surprisingly enough. But I do think it's crazy, though, that after Brothers in Arms finished up in 2008, and there was like some mobile game releases around that time, also in 2008, to coincide with the hype from releasing a new game, the mobile side of things continued on for a while, and they did Brothers in Arms 2 Global Front in 2010. And I think it's really, I don't know, dare I say ballsy to take, the number and stick it in at the end of the title to kind of signify that this is the next big game in the series. And then they did it again with Brothers in Arms 3 Sons of War in 2014. Imagine if you're like a casual Brothers in Arms fan, like you played the games when you're a kid and you're like, man, I remember that series. And then all of a sudden, like, you just see that the third game in the series, you don't remember how many games there were back in the day. You just assume the third one's the newest one because it's here on your Android, iOS, and Windows phone if you had a Windows phone for whatever reason. Now, interestingly enough, this mobile game was, like, gameplay-wise, like, okay. It was surprising how snappy it was for a mobile game in 2014. But, like, there's no soul to this game. There's no story that just feels important. And it was just a shame. People have been wanting a new mainline Brothers in Arms game for quite a while, and nothing. There was supposed to be another Brothers in Arms game called Furious 4 that was supposed to be coming back at some point. But, like, they showed off some stuff and fans are like, what are they doing? And then they canceled it, and then the elements were put into Battleborn and then that got canceled. And I don't know, Randy Pitchford said that they are working on a new one, and that was back in 2021. We're still waiting to see if it actually becomes a thing.
In the mid to late 2000s, Guitar Hero and Rock Band were usually popular rhythm games that would be played with a special controller made for the games. But Donkey Konga for the GameCube actually predates these because it released in 2003/2004 with those little bongo drums that I'm sure everyone remembers who was around back then. You plug in the drums and then you start drumming to some beats. Pretty simple, and shortly after the first one, there was a sequel called Donkey Konga 2 that released worldwide in 2004 and 2005. This had some new tracks, characters, and mini-games, and it was pretty well known that there were 2 Donkey Konga games, and most people probably think that 2 was the last game in the series, right? Well, in 2005, before we even got to Donkey Konga 2 here, they released Donkey Konga 3 in Japan, and there's no way that anyone knows this one. Once again, this was for the GameCube, and once again, a bunch of new tracks and minigames were added. And why did we never get it? Well, I can only speculate, but I think it's a mix of Donkey Konga 2 not reviewing/selling that well in the West, and then maybe Donkey Konga 3 also didn't do that well in Japan, so they didn't bother to release another one. And I think Donkey Konga 3 also had a bunch of Famicom tracks on it, so maybe they didn't feel like picking a new catalog of songs for the West either. But yeah, Donkey Konga 3 was the last game in the Donkey Konga series of games.
The infamous series actually hasn't been around for quite some time, but it was kind of big, being a Sucker Punch production back in the PlayStation 3 and 4 era. But interestingly enough, the final game that released was a standalone expansion for Infamous Second Son, but it was standalone, which means it was its own release altogether, just maybe not at the level as like a full-on entry. So that brings us to talking about Infamous First Light, which released in 2014, and while it was a standalone expansion, you didn't have to own the original game to play it, and it was a prequel, and you played as a female character, Abigail Fetch Walker, who's like a conduit and manipulates neon lights or something. And honestly, while this game definitely wasn't the scale and scope of a mainline game, they kind of get to the point pretty quickly with the gameplay, and that works for its favor here, because the game feels refined, faster pace, things move along in like an agile manner, and the neon stuff was actually kind of cool. And story-wise, it had a much more personal and darker tone than Second Son had. It had this story intertwined with the ideas of trauma, loss, and guilt, with a female main character with a good voice performance by Laura Bailey actually made the game feel like it had emotional depth and weight to it. And while the game was short and criticized for it, it was strong. I mean, it's only 4 hours long, which is kind of half the length of what you would expect from a full game. It was interesting, and this would be the last thing ever released from Infamous. There was a physical disc that would release as well for it. It uses some of the same assets. I get it. Standalone DLC. But I mean, I don't know. I think this one's pretty cool. I think that this game does not have a lot of people knowing about it. And if you're ever bored and you see it like on sale or something, maybe check it out. Okay, so speaking of shut down, Skylanders. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. That was crazy hype. Yeah.
Okay, there were kids who really, really liked Skylanders. It was a little before my time, so I never was down for it. And I saw how they massacred Spyro, so I wasn't, I was already put off by it.
I don't know what year it came out, but I feel like I was a teenager and this was played by like 10-year-olds.
2011, Spyro's Adventure came out. What's interesting is this was an annual series. And for a while, Skylanders was massive. Like, right? Like, you remember that?
Oh, dude, it was insane. You walk into any like electronics store, there's like tons of figures and stuff. Yeah.
So let's just go through the 6 main Skylanders games. We'll take turns. We'll alternate saying each name of the game. I'll just feed you the lines and then you can edit it out or not edit it out. 2011, Spyro Adventure. Okay, now say 2012 Giants.
2012 Giants.
2013 Swap Force. And then say 2014 Trap Team.
2014 Trap Team.
Then 2015, there was Superchargers. 2016 was Imaginators.
2016 Imaginators.
And Imaginators marked the end of the series. Activision decided to put the series on an indefinite hold, and that was it for Skylanders. Because while it was kind of unexpected for the series with how massive it was just a couple of years earlier, people didn't think the series would just like abruptly wrap up all of a sudden. But there was one more game that released that they kind of squeaked out at the end that nobody remembers. And that was Skylanders Ring of Heroes, which actually released in 2019, which was 3 years after Skylanders had wrapped up. And this was a mobile RPG spin-off, not made by Toys for Bob, who had made the previous one. But it was published by Activision. Originally 2018 as a soft launch, but 2019 was the full release. And it was a turn-based gacha RPG, which had Skylanders in it, and you could collect like 80 different Skylanders, but it was completely digital. There was no toy aspect of it, which I feel like was the big appeal for Skylanders. And when the game released, reactions were pretty negative, actually. I mean, the combat looked cool, the art style was fine, and people were happy that there was literally anything keeping Skylanders alive because there were fans of that series. I'm not gonna ignore the fact that it was popular and people liked it. But the monetization, the grind, and the gacha mechanics were like, all right, come on, guys. Like, this is what you're gonna do with Skylanders. This is how you're gonna, the last hurrah for the series. They decided, you know what? The development team was called Com2 US. I've never heard of them, but they were like, we are going to do a reboot update and we are going to overhaul the entire system, change the battling system, redesign the UI again, and rewrite parts of the story. And they released the reboot update in December of 2020 and nobody cared. The player base did not return and they shut the servers down in early 2022. And that ended the run, effectively meaning that Skylanders, while it died, almost a decade ago, it lived on a little bit longer, and technically you could say the series officially died only 3 years ago, and that sounds less long. So that game did something. It had a 4-year run that wasn't successful. I don't get it. Until Dawn, it was a cool game. It was innovative, it was different, they were doing things differently. It was popular, rightfully so, but the amount of things that have come out of this series after Until Dawn has been a bit mixed. I mean, we've gotten the Dark Pictures anthology, which was, unrelated from the series, but it shows, a proof of concept from the same development studio, and The Quarry, which I did not enjoy. But a lot of the other stuff, like the movie and all this extra stuff, definitely feels extra. Of course, with Until Dawn, they had to do some extra stuff with games without doing main games. So there's 3 games in the Until Dawn trilogy. Did you know that? Probably not. Some people know that a year after Until Dawn released, they released Until Dawn Rush of Blood, which was like a VR on-rail shooter game. It was a direct spinoff. But there was actually another VR game released 2 years later that I feel like nobody ever talks about or even knows existed. That's called The Inpatient. It doesn't even have Until Dawn in the name, but it's a prequel to Until Dawn. It makes this a trilogy, which is dumb. It's a survival horror game, first person. You play as a patient who has amnesia or something. There's like a mind collapse and you have to like get your memories back. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not a fan of game series that decide to do VR spinoffs. Just make something original, or I don't know. I just don't care for these types of games because a lot of the time the quality is pretty low, and I feel like this happened here as well. I mean, Metacritic gave it a 59 out of 100, and I feel like that is, giving it too much credit. The presentation atmosphere is good. The pacing at the beginning was maybe not that good. There was good sound design, but like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the point? Like, this isn't what people wanted when they said they wanted more Until Dawn. And I think people are still waiting for more Until Dawn, but done correctly. I mean, the quarry was close. I mean, it was goofy. I think your best bet is just playing the Dark Pictures games, getting over the brokenness of them, and just trying to enjoy the story, because those can be fun. They're a little hit or miss. Overall, good experience because they're co-op, so they do have that going for them. I don't know. That's it. Until Dawn is 3 games. What world are we living in?
The Metro franchise, as many of you probably know, is a series of post-apocalyptic first-person shooters based on Dmitry Kulkovsky's novels set in the ruins of Moscow after a nuclear war. And it's known for its atmospheric storytelling and the survival horror tone, and it's like a deeply immersive world that blends realism, stealth, and resource management into gameplay. It's a very well-done series, and the games have a very unique feeling and setting to them, and they're definitely very much worth checking out. And between 2010 and 2019, they released 3 mainline games called Metro 2033, Metro Last Light, and Metro Exodus. But the actual last game in the series is not Metro Exodus, it is Metro Awakening, a first-person VR game developed by Vertigo Games, who specialize in VR games and previously saw success with Arizona Sunshine 1 and 2. The game released in late 2024, so not that long ago, across all major VR platforms like the PS5 VR, Steam VR, Meta Quests, and I think even like the HTC Vive. Story-wise, it is set before the first game and tells the origin story of the character Khan, and they even had the author of the novels write the story for the game. Matter of fact, what is actually really interesting is they changed the game direction because they felt like the story was so good that they could make the game more story-driven. And once the game released, it was really well received, and even won the Steam Awards' VR Game of the Year category. I mean, if you're into VR games, then this seems like a pretty good title to check out, something that I would check out if I ever picked up a PlayStation VR or a Steam VR, because I mean, I like the Metro games, so this seems pretty cool actually. Have you ever heard of Steel Battalion for the classic Xbox?
Yeah, isn't that the thing where like you have all the peripherals and people like set it up and they go to like conventions and still try to play sometimes?
Yes, it had like this controller that was made for this game specifically that cost like $200 back then, which is like $360 right now. And you know, there was some crazy thing. You had to buy this $200 controller to play the game. You could only play this game with it until they released the like DLC/sequel shortly after, and there were 2 games that you could play with this controller at that point. The games were fine, I guess. People who did pick it up, they did enjoy it. Now you could question did they enjoy it because they spent that much money and you know, they wanted to enjoy it, or you know, they actually enjoyed it. Nonetheless, it went on a hiatus for a long time, and at some point between 2004, which was the second game releasing, and 2012, when the next game released, Capcom, you know, made a couple decisions. The first decision was, we're gonna hire From Software to make this next game, which, you know, that's a good idea. They have like some other mech games, they have their own mech series, but they're definitely qualified to make a mech game, right? At some point during this time, they also decided they're gonna replace the requirement for the comically large controller that they sold back then, right? You know, that also sounds like a good decision. Well, they replaced it with a hybrid control between your 360 controller and the Xbox 360 Kinect. You would aim and stuff with the Xbox 360 controller, and then you had to do like the other mech stuff, like the other stuff that the controller did like in the cockpit with the Kinect. And this did not work. What? You look so like confused.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand what you're explaining, but okay.
Like it was like a hybrid thing. Like they had to get special permission from Microsoft for this.
I understand what you're saying. I just think it sounds awful.
Yeah, it was awful. It was pretty awful. The Kinect does not work on like the best games in the Kinect, and like it just didn't work for this. And the fact that it was like this hybrid thing, I think made it even worse. It's just pretty weird. It was low rated. It didn't sell well, and we never saw anything from Steel Battalion again. And I don't think anyone knows about this third one.
Okay, did you ever play, what was it called? Was it called Project Metropolis Racing? Sorry, it was called Metropolis Street Racer. You'll see where I'm going with this in a second. It was a Dreamcast exclusive. Did you ever play it?
Sounds familiar.
After the Dreamcast died, Microsoft swooped in as the publisher, and the development studio continued with making spiritual successors known as Project Gotham Racing, which is where I thought it was Project Metropolis Racer, because I knew it was like a Batman, Superman reference. But no, Project Gotham Racer, or also known as PGR. And those games had a series of releases, and they were kind of the go-to Xbox racing series before Forza took over. So there was Project Gotham Racing in 2001 on the Xbox, Project Gotham Racing 2, Project Gotham Racing 3 on the Xbox 360, Project Gotham Racing Mobile. There was some mobile one, I guess, for the J2ME. Was that Java? Java platform.
Oh yeah, those are awful, dude. Those are always awful, dude.
Don't worry. I know that would sound like the game that would kill the series, right? But it didn't. There was a PGR4 for the Xbox 360, which was actually the game that came with my Xbox 360 bundled back in the day. And then also in 2007, they did Project Gotham Racing for Windows Mobile, and that could also be the mark of the end of the series. But believe it or not, that wasn't the end. 2007 saw the last mainline release with PGR4. They wouldn't do another mainline release, but while the series was technically dead, 2009 saw the official final title and final use of the PGR tagline. 2009 had Project Gotham Racing Ferrari Edition. Now here's the thing. I want you to guess what console this game came out on. We're gonna play this little game. We're gonna bounce back and forth. It wasn't the 360. You're not gonna guess it.
Windows?
It wasn't Windows.
I mean, they had the Windows phones, but you said they already made one for the Windows phones. Why would they make another one? Was it like the HoloLens or like some dumb like experiment like that they did around then?
They're getting closer. They released it for the Zune HD.
Like the MP3 player?
Yeah, the Zune HD, the one that had the screen on it, like the 2009 Zune. It was supposed to compete with the iPod Touch. This was Microsoft's attempt directly to go head to head with the iPod Touch and the iPhone with the Zune HD. And they released a PGR game, the Ferrari Edition. And it wasn't the same studio that did the previous PGR games. It was some other studio thrown at it. This would be the last game.
How many games did they release on the Zune MP3 player?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should do a video on Zune HD games.
Playing every Zune game, dude.
But I'm looking at the thing and it just says there was a couple of games that released, including AudioServe, Hexic, and Project Gotham Racing. It's just like one of those does not sound like the others. The only other interesting thing I could find while doing research on just PGR in general was that when Forza Horizon was being cooked up, it was originally conceived as a reboot to Project Gotham Racing, but then they decided to just do Forza Horizon instead. So now they're doing Fable.
Syberia 1 and 2 were pretty cool early 2000s graphic adventure games with like a unique story, gameplay, and a certain art style that is definitely recognizable. Both games saw pretty big commercial and critical success, and then for 13 years we didn't get another one until they made the third one, and that one you probably heard of, and that one is the one that is not that good, and like people kind of didn't like this one. And I could have been the only one that thought Syberia 3 was the last game in the series. Well, as it turns out, there's a fourth game called Syberia: The World Before from 2022. Which the most surprising part about this is, I guess, not only the existence of the game, but also this is a good game. Like, this reviewed very well, and it had the same rating as the first two games. So somehow they managed to actually make a good game again after the third one was kind of underwhelming. This is kind of a sequel/prequel hybrid from what I understand, and there's some parts taking place after the third game, and then some parts taking place before the first game, so it like jumps between timelines. And reading about this game, it seems like they did really learn from Syberia 3's failure and shortcomings and tried hard to write a good story and fix some of the things people didn't like about 3. So they actually put out a well-made game with good gameplay that people liked. And, you know, it's kind of shocking that I didn't even know about this. And, you know, maybe I'm the only one, but I feel like a lot of people missed this. Sadly though, the original creator of the series, Benoit Sokal, died in 2021 during the development of the fourth game, so if there are any future sequels, they would have to be done without his guidance. So we will see if it maybe stays the last game in the series, or if there will be new ones in the future.
Have you ever played a Coolboarders game?
Coolboarders? Like skateboarders, but they're cool?
Yeah, but I think they're snowboarders.
Oh, okay. Like snowboarders, but they're cool?
Yeah, they're Coolboarders.
Oh, okay. No, I've not.
It was a video game series back in the 90s on the PlayStation originally. It was developed by a studio called UEP Systems in Japan. And this is like big for snowboarding because this is like before SSX or 1080 snowboarding was like a thing. There was a handful of games released back to back to back to back. Coolboarders in 96. Then guess what? The sequel game is called Coolboarders 2. And that released in 97. Then in 98, they did another sequel. Can you guess what the name was?
Coolboarders 3.
How'd you know? You're looking it up. Then in 99, a different studio took over, but they did Coolboarders 4. And then a couple years later on the PS1 and PS2, Coolboarders 2001 released. And at the same time, the studio that made the original one also made another Coolboarders game called Coolboarders Burn with 3 R's in it, which was also sometimes referred to as Snow Surfers. And that was on the Sega Dreamcast, which was like their own version of Coolboarders 4, which is probably the true Coolboarders 4 to tell you the truth. While this was a series that was annual back in the day, there was surprisingly one more game. And I know to you, all of these games probably could have counted if they were the last game because you've never even heard of Coolboarders. But to the people who do know what Coolboarders is, I feel like most people don't know about the final Coolboarders in the Coolboard series. Finally, in 2001, on the PlayStation 2, in Japan only, Coolboarders Code Alien released.
What?
I just think that's interesting. So we had Coolboarders 1 through 4, Coolboarders 2001, Coolboarders Burn, or Snow Surfers, and then Coolboarders Code Alien. It was made by the original creators. It kind of just was like a regular Coolboarders game. It also was the last game that they worked on before their studio shut down. So I don't think it sold very well, but hey, RIP Coolboarders Code Alien. It's a shame we never got to play the Alien one here. And in honor of that, I am going to play it someday soon. I'm going to get it on my Steam Deck. Legally, of course.
Okay, while we're on the topic of things that were popular, like, long time ago, you remember how big Nintendogs for the original DS was? That was like massive.
Oh, yeah. You know what's crazy? There were so many different versions of that game when you could get all of the same dogs in all of the versions. Like, they sold 3 different versions, but you could get all of the dogs in any of the 3 versions. It was just the starter dogs.
Yeah, and the cover, dude. What if you wanted to display the cover?
I guess so. You have to buy all 3 or 4. There was a bunch.
But yeah, they continued this trend with the other ones, right? At first, I was like, yeah, most people probably remember Nintendogs plus Cats for the 3DS, right? As a launch title, as a big series. Most people probably remember it.
I remember that because specifically it didn't do well, right?
I mean, it sold 4 million copies. It's fine. Obviously, it couldn't sell as much as the first one. I think it's the second most selling DS game with like 25 million copies or something. Obviously, they couldn't have hit that, right? So I guess it did sell way less than the first one. And obviously, it was just over, it was like a novelty like on the original DS. Anyways, they released the French Bulldog version, the Golden Retriever version, and the Toy Poodle version in the West. And basically, the games are just like Nintendogs, a little bit updated graphics, some new features and modes, and they have all the original breeds from the first Nintendogs games, and then some new breeds and cats. But there's one version that was Japan and China exclusive that we didn't get, that people do not remember, and that was the Shiba Inu edition. They didn't get a Golden Retriever edition there, they got a Shiba Inu edition. There's nothing really different about that edition besides the Shiba Inu on the cover. Interestingly enough, while in the West and Japan it released in 2011, China didn't get this till 2013. Technically, the Shiba Inu version in China is the last release in the Nintendo series in 2013. And, obviously people don't know about it because it's like, exclusive to Asia.
Are you drinking alcohol right now while recording this?
No, what?
Oh, because I was gonna say you should pour one out for the Chinese version of Nintendogs plus Cats.
Do you remember the Wipeout series from back in the day? Like Wipeout 64 for the N64 or Wipeout Fusion for the PS2, depending on what console you had.
I do.
What do you think of them? Pretty good games, right?
I only rented them from Blockbuster a handful of times, like maybe once or twice in total, so I don't remember too much, but I mean, people liked them.
Can you tell me what they are?
Like a racing game, right? Like a floaty racing game.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, keep that in mind. We'll go back to that later, okay?
Kind of like F-Zero, but not F-Zero, right?
Right, yeah. Kind of like F-Zero, but not F-Zero, yeah. So the latest one in this series is actually so obscure, I don't think that people that played the original Wipeout games know about it at all, and that's Wipeout Merge for iOS and Android. Initially, this game was announced as Wipeout Rush in 2021, but later they renamed it to Wipeout Merge, and this was the first Wipeout game since Wipeout 64 to not release on a PlayStation console, by the way.
Why would they call it Wipeout Merge? What a terrible subtitle to use. Like, of all the possible words, they could have done extreme, they could have done, like, fast. I mean, merge? Like you're trying to merge into traffic on the freeway? Like, this is the most boring part of the whole thing.
Oh, dude, I wish it was about merging traffic. When they were making Wipeout Merge, they must have been smoking some bad stuff. Like, whatever they were smoking, the dealer stretched it with, like, the worst thing possible, okay? Firstly, and most shockingly, you know how you said this was a racing series? You don't actually race the carts or the ships in this game yourself. All you do is manage a ship that is racing, and you fire the guns during the race in order to be faster at the race than the other races. You don't actually drive the ship.
That's like Descenders removing bicycles out of their game. That's like the closest analogy. I'm still upset about it.
That's a sender stuff, stupid. But actually, the merging is describing like the microtransaction / level up system in the game. So the way it works is like you open these boxes, then you get like cards of like different rarity of ships, and then you have to merge the same color cards together, and then you get the higher rarity, and then you gotta find another of the higher rarity, merge that together, and then you go up and up and up. It's like a crappy system, and you open loot boxes to get them. Obviously sometimes you can watch an ad to get a loot box or get one for free, But like, it's still like an atrociously bad system.
Is this game still running?
No.
Okay. I was like, there's no way.
But like, the thing is, they tried really hard to wrap this whole like herd of a game into like nice visuals. They made like these comic story panels, wrote like a story for that. They really tried packaging this turd like it's a Christmas present, but it didn't work because the release was limited. It rolled out in the UK at the end of 2021, and then slowly in early 2022, it rolled out like worldwide. The interest was really, really low because this game was really, really bad, and it was not a racing game, as I said. So they shut down the online servers pretty quickly and eventually delisted the game. And I kid you not, I was looking for this. I could not find the dates of when this happened. Like, not enough people gave a shit about this game that someone wrote down the date that it got delisted or the servers got shut down. Nobody reported on it. Nobody talked about it online. Like, no wiki listed the dates. It just was shut down sometime after because nobody wanted to play it. And apparently the iOS version is preserved though, and you can go play the offline like campaign single player stuff.
Ooh. Dude, you get to experience it for all of its glory.
Back in the 90s, when video game companies were big on mascots, like Sega had Sonic and Nintendo had Mario, Namco wanted to move away from Pac-Man as the mascot because, you know, Pac-Man was kind of old, like, you know, from the early 80s, and they wanted to get more with the time. So they released a platformer Klonoa Door to Phantom Mile for the PS1 in 1997 in Japan. And the main character, Klonoa, which by the way sounds like a candy bar, was gonna be their mascot going forward. And they started making mangas featuring the character, and then they started releasing the game in the West as well in 1998. And that game was actually well received. It was a good 3D platformer, gameplay-wise and visually. And they took a 4-year break, and then boom, they released a sequel called Klonoa 2 Lunati's Veil that was also good. And they really must have taken those 4 years off to plan out the future, because in the same year they would also release a GBA exclusive called Klonoa Empire of Dreams. And 1 year later, in 2002, they released a beach volleyball spin-off game for the PS1. For some reason, this released on the PS1 even though Klonoa 2 released on the PS2. I don't know, they went back a generation with a later game release, which is weird. You know, it doesn't really matter. Also, this didn't release in North America. This only released in Japan and Europe for some reason. But North America would actually get another GBA game called Klonoa 2 Dream Champ Tournament the same year. After that, we never saw another game for the Klonoa series, at least in the West, because apparently the sales were really bad, even though some of the games were well received. And there's reports that the beach volleyball spin-off only sold 3,230 copies in Japan during its lifetime. They must have realized Klonoa is not going to be the next big thing, and, you know, why are they making 2 games a year? They shouldn't even be making 1 game a year for the series. So they kind of stopped releasing games. But there was one more final game in 2002 that was Japan exclusive. There was an action RPG spin-off for the GPA called Klonoa Heroes Densetsu no Star Medal, which, I mean, might mean like you don't get a star medal or something. I don't know. I don't speak Japanese, but
I think it means Legendary Star Medal.
Oh, okay. It's never made it to the West, and, you know, nobody knows it here. So, yeah, I don't know. People barely remember Klonoa, I think. Like, I feel like if we surveyed 100 people, there'd be like 9 people that would know what Klonoa is.
Real quick, I just want to like run a quick survey with the people watching this and you, I guess. But anybody out there who saw Klonoa for the very first time, did anybody not immediately think this was like a Sonic the Hedgehog character? Was it just me?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it.
You can see it. Like, I looked at it, I'm like, is this just like Sonic fan art?
I mean, that's what they're trying to create, right? Their own Sonic, so maybe they like ripped it off. But you can see on the hat, he has the Pac-Man symbol.
Also, have you ever seen the concept art for what Klonoa used to look like?
It's like early Warframe concept art. What the hell is going on, dude?
I don't know what it's like a rock character.
Or like a Dragon Ball Z villain.
Yeah, Klonoa is interesting. They should make 30 more. Luke, I have a question for you. Do you know of the game series Saberman?
No.
How do you not know Saberman, dude? There is a historical significance with the Saberman series, dating all the way back to the game developer studio Ultimate Play the Game. This is an interesting game studio in itself. They later rebranded as Rare, and now everything starts to make sense, right?
Oh.
The Saberman series dates all the way back to the 1980s, so it's just like the, you know, side-scrolling, colorful game with the black background. It came out on like the ZX Spectrum or something like that. I mean, there was a Commodore 64 release too. Like, okay, sorry, Luke.
I don't know. Did you play it on the C6 Spectrum?
I've never had a ZX Spectrum, no.
Okay, I never had a Commodore either.
Have you ever had a BBC Micro? Because apparently it was on there also. What is a BBC Micro?
A what micro?
That sounds contradictory in itself to be called a BBC Micro.
How can the British Broadcasting Service be micro?
Nonetheless, there were 4 games released in the Saberman series back in the day. There was Sabre Wulf in 1984, another game called Underworld, but spelled like UR, kind of how Wolf was, also in 1984. Another game called Night Lore, which was also in 1984. They were just pumping them out. And then another game called Pentagram, the 4th Saberman game. And interestingly enough, all these games came out in 1984 with Pentagram coming out in 1986. The series was kind of short-lived. However, 20 years later, a new Saberman game would come out in the form of 2004's Sabre Wulf, developed by Rare, which makes sense because it is them. And essentially it was a remake, reimagining of the original Sabre Wulf game, except the box art on this one looks much more like a furry character this time around. Not sure if I like the box art. It's kind of... just gives me weird vibes. It gives me like deviant art vibes. I don't know. The big takeaway here isn't that, you know, Sabre Wulf was a bad game, even though it scored middle of the road. I mean, it was generally positive. It was just kind of interesting. You know, this was after the Rare acquisition by Microsoft. So anytime Rare put a game out on a Nintendo console, it was, you know, like you're looking at like a side eyebrow, like, yo, they're still hanging out with their ex. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like that. It's a little bit of a head scratcher. Why 20 years later did they decide this is the perfect game for the Game Boy Advance? Everyone's gonna buy it. I don't know. Maybe they were just trying to do something with like the IP. I mean, Rare was doing some other things. Didn't they do like Mr. Pants or something also during that time? Sorry, it was called It's Mr. Pants. My bad. That was also in 2004. It was a weird time for Rare when they were trying to figure out who they are after the Microsoft acquisition. That would be it. After 20 years of it being done, Saberman swoops back in the form of Sabre Wulf again, and then just proceeds to disappear all over again. Now, however, there was plans to do more with the Saberman series that got canceled. You see, after the release of Sabre Wulf and during the acquisition of Rare from Microsoft, they had been working on a Diddy Kong Racing sequel game called Donkey Kong Racing. However, since they were no longer partnered with Nintendo, they couldn't use the IP of Donkey Kong on the Xbox. That wouldn't fly. So they had to come up with a different IP to use, and they just said, hey, it might not be Donkey Kong level of fame, but what if we bring Saberman back and we do Saberman Stampede, which was going to be a racing game. And there's some footage of the game out there from the pre-release era, but the game ended up getting canceled. That was it. There was nothing from Sabre Wulf or Saberman ever again until Rare Replay randomly had the Sabre Wulf games in it. That's all she wrote for that. Did you know, though, that Rare also, on GoldenEye, they had an emulator for the ZX Spectrum built in on the cartridge, and then they disabled it before launch. But, like, there's, like, emulation of their old games built in, I think. And then they also did some stuff. They, like, have a Killer Instinct character based off of Sabre Wulf. I think put a little Easter egg in Banjo-Tooie. Just like Saberman's just there chilling. Saberman and Smash when?
Never.
Damn.
As many people remember, in 2014 there was a very crappy revival of the Thief series for modern console that had been like through like 6 years of development hell and was gonna reboot the series after it had been on hiatus for 10 years. I think most people have seen like the cover and they kind of heard about Thief.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, I was so confused.
I'm just getting a drink. I thought I could hear you. I just.
Yeah, I was so confused. What's going on? I don't know. Okay.
You can leave it in. You can leave it in. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyways. No, okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I just needed a drink.
Anyways, with how bad this Thief reboot was, it wasn't successful. Like, nobody bought it, you know, critics panned it, and plans for a sequel or more games to this 2014 reboot version were scrapped at that time. And, you know, the franchise was dead from 2014 until just a few months ago, when in June of this year, at a PlayStation State of Play, they announced there was gonna be a VR game in the Thief series called Thief VR Legacy of Shadow. And, you know, I didn't know about this because I kind of forgot about the Thief series after 2014. As many people did, I assume. Also, we don't play VR games, I guess. So, it's pretty crazy to see a new Thief game in this prequel reboot series from 2014, because it sounds like they're gonna connect the original series with the reboot timeline in like this VR game, because it's like a prequel set between 3 and then 2014. It's kind of weird, and they tease it like on the website. They say the story is about a legendary artifact holding a legacy from the past. And then some people who got to review the game said it was set between Thief 3 and, Thief 2014. But there's no release date, so we will see if that actually happens. And in this game, for the first time, you don't play as the main character Garrett. You play as some girl called Magpie. I guess she's another thief. I guess that's what they do in the Thief series. They steal stuff. This game is made by a small studio and published by the developer of Metro Awakening, which we talked about earlier. So, maybe it'll be good. I mean, sometimes these VR games are good. And nobody from the 2014 reboot is directly involved, besides like the rights holder, Eidos Interactive. And the reviewers that did get to play the game, they did say it was pretty good. So that's what I'm basing this on. Because it's not out yet. It's gonna come out allegedly this year.
I think this game counts for this list, even though it's not out yet, because this is going to end up being a forgotten game. There's no way it's not, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's already a VR game. Those are already forgotten. Like, even the big franchises that get VR games get forgotten, but this...
Yeah, dude, do you remember the Assassin's Creed VR?
No.
No?
Honestly, the only one I can always think of is Fallout 4 VR.
That's such a random game to only remember.
Nah, because, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because the Fallout series... It's like 2 back-to-back bad releases for the Fallout series that I'm, like, upset about it. Fallout 76 and Fallout 4 VR.
I have one more game that I don't really need to talk about it, but in my notes, I just put 4 words. Wii Sports Club sucked.
It did.
I didn't do any research on that. I just remember I tried playing Wii Sports Club on my Wii U because I wanted to like scratch that Wii Sports itch, and it just was bad. It was like a subscription membership you had to pay for, and it was dumb. And then like it was a pain to use, and there's a lot of limitations, and I don't think anyone liked it. And technically, that was the last entry officially in the Wii like Play universe of like Wii Sports, Wii Play. I mean Switch Sports, but that's technically Switch, not Wii. You know what I mean? But that's it. I didn't do any research on it. I just had it in my notes in case I wanted to bring it up. And here we are at the end of the video bringing it up.
Did you remember? You said the subscription thing. What do you remember about the subscription?
I remember being in college. I had the Wii U. I wanted to play Wii Sports. I saw this. I was like, this is really dumb. I may have paid for it, or there was a free trial. And then I remember trying to golf, but I had to put the gamepad on the floor to golf. And I thought that was really annoying.
And that was the big feature they advertised on the cover, by the way, that you have to put your controller on the floor to golf.
I was like, my floor's dirty. I'm in college. Like, I don't vacuum. I mean, and then there wasn't a lot of room in my dorm room either. It was a really small dorm room. It was like 12 by 6 feet. It was a closet pretty much. And I never played it again after that. So it must not have been good enough to leave an impact beyond that memory right there.
Yeah, and I do remember that the subscription was like really stupid, and so I looked it up, and so you could get a day pass for $1.99. It would give you 24 hours access to all the sports games, or you could pay $9.99 to get the club pass, which would give you unlimited access to one sport.
That is dumber than what I remember.
Yeah,
Wii Sports was a free game for the Wii. It came with the Wii, and you just got to play it. If you're going to try to do something like this, you don't do it with the game that was free previously in the last generation. They were smoking something with the Wii U. I don't know what. Was it $9.99 a month or $9.99?
No, $9.99 unlimited. You just bought the sport for $9.99.
The day pass thing's almost more like insulting then.
Yeah, $1.99.
You know what I mean? Like $1.99 so you can play for 24 hours. Like, what? I don't know. That's so weird to me. Well, I feel good about this list. What do you feel? How do you feel?
What do I feel?
Yeah, what do you feel?
I don't know, dude. Lots of emotions right now.
Is it because you're grateful for our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers?
Very grateful.
Thank you.
God bless them.
If you would like this video and you want to have your name in the credits, check out those things. And also check out our other videos. YouTube thinks you're going to like this one. We make videos like this regularly, and it's been kind of fun doing stuff like this. So, yeah. We'll see you guys soon with another video. Very soon.